In this video, I'm going to share 5 jungling secrets and mechanics that you can use to save yourself time and become a higher level when you're playing Pokemon Unite. Let's not waste any time and get straight into it. Tip number 1 is to kite and avoid the farm when you're doing your jungle clear. This is the number 1 mistake I see people making constantly. When you're doing your jungle clear, you've got to understand how these units attack you. So the first Pokemon that you generally attack is the Accelerator. That's the blue buff. The blue buff, what it'll do is it'll line you up and it'll shoot out kind of like a conic section of delayed bursts, right? The best way to avoid that is to go on either side of the conic section, or generally what I like to do is I like to go behind the Accelerator when I notice that it's lining up the attacks. If it hits you, it'll stun you. You don't want to do that, and especially if you're playing a Pokemon with a passive that can be popped from a bit of damage, like one of the Eevees, you want to absolutely avoid doing this. Now, the second thing that you can do is you can leash this farm towards the next farm that you're going for. So if I'm taking out the blue buff here, you can see I'm leashing it up towards the red buff because that's the direction that I want to be running. And the way that you do that is you hit the farm and then you walk away from it and the farm will follow you. And you want to avoid this farm attacking you because you want to engage at full health when you go to either lane. Utilize this tip and you're going to see an improvement in your jungle gameplay. The second tip that I have is more of a timing guide. Now you need to rotate to your farm on time. You've got 10 minutes in Pokemon Unite. Time is of the essence. The top players will optimize their time on the map. So generally this is a good guide. Your farm will respawn exactly 1 minute after you kill it. Your initial jungle farm will spawn at 9:45, generally after you've killed that initial Xatu. This is the rotational basis that you want to take on. You've got your 9:45 clear, and then you go to either your top or your bottom lane to clear the bees in that lane. You need to be at one of those lanes. And then you go back to your jungle because it's about 1 minute and 5 seconds later, because it roughly takes you about 5 seconds to clear that farm after it initially spawns. So at around about the 8:40 mark, you want to go back to that initial buff that you started on. If you took out the blue buff first, you go back to the blue buff. If you took out the red buff first, you go back to the red buff. And then you take buff, do your clear, and then you go to the middle 8-minute bees clear. You want to make sure that you're here on time, because if you're there 3 seconds faster than the enemy, you're going to be able to get all of that farm and the enemy's not going to get much of it at all. And then what you want to do after that clear is you head back towards your jungle, and if you've done this properly, your next lot of buffs will be spawning at 7 minutes 30 or 7 minutes 35. You want to take one of your buffs here and then you head down to either lane, or you head up to top lane to take care of those 7-minute 20 bees. When you're at these bees, depending on your levels, by this point you should be around about level 9. If you're not quite level 9 at this particular point, then what you can do is you can take that second buff you've got sitting around there and then rotate back to that lane. You go to the bottom objective. You take that bottom objective. Generally, you try to win the fight. If your rotations are absolutely perfect, you go to that bottom objective, you win that fight, and then about the 6-minute 30 mark, your next round of buffs will be up. So you go back to your buffs, and then 1:30 after that initial bees clear in the middle is when the next lot of bees will be up. So you go for your 4th round of buffs, and then you go to the middle, and then you rotate to the top. So that is what your first 4 minutes of gameplay as a jungler looks like. You need to drill this rotation into your head if you want to be the best jungler that you can be in your random solo queue lobbies. I can absolutely guarantee you, if you just nailed your rotations, you're going to be better than a lot of other players, and you're going to be consistently hitting level 9 to get your Unite move at that first objective, and you're going to be able to win that bottom lane objective and continue your rotations for that next minute to get to your top lane. Now, I'm just going to point out, if you are getting some value out of this video, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. I put a lot of effort and hard work into these videos, so I would really appreciate your support while I'm doing this. Let's get on to the third tip. The third tip is map awareness. Know which lane you want to gank. Know the health bars of your teammates and make sure that you're panning the map. Now I'm going to show this clip here of SlashCan explaining their tournament run where Overlord is in the jungle, and you can communicate and see how their map awareness led them to be in a fantastic position while they're playing in a tournament.
Espeon, they do get the mid one, so now they're winning. You can see Venusaur is just gonna gank top, and me and Mew. So it's Slowbro Mew bottom against Inteleon, and if you don't know, Inteleon is supposed to be kind of this auto win lane. Like, it secures Latinos from 70% HP, so usually in competitive, the team who gets Inteleon wins the lane. Look at the Inteleon's points. 4 points. That means 2 points on tree. They did not get a single farm in lane. Me and Kyrios 6-0'd them. We got every single farm in lane against an Inteleon. So that is just, first off, that is unheard of. I don't think any other team has ever done this in a tournament. Second off, no other team has done this in a tournament against any team, even with Inteleon on their team. But we did it against an Inteleon too. So we were laughing our asses off. I don't know. Let me see if I can find the camera. It doesn't show us at all. I wish it did, because me and Kyrios were laughing our asses off, and we're literally hard commenting like, "Yo, they're to bot. They're level 3," and you can see Overlord run bot. He was originally gonna gank top, but as soon as he heard how weak they were bot, he runs bot, and we just run them over bot. He wards out there to see if the jungler is here, and yeah, we're just gonna absolutely destroy them. Don't even hit the bees much. We're just gonna hit them and kill them on pad. They're absolutely.
Here you can see at the top level, it's absolutely evident that Overlord was using great map awareness to be aware of what lane he needs to be ganking in order to get the most value as a jungler. The way you can do this in your solo queue lobbies is you can pan over the map and you understand the matchups. If you're laning against Pokemon that are weak early, and you're the jungler, then you need to be aware of which lane the enemy has got their weak early Pokemon, and you can go to that lane to gank so you can get a very good lead there. So this is absolutely a very important tip, and I just think that because a lot of the time when people say I have map awareness, they just say look at the minimap. It's a little bit more intricate than that, and so that's why I'm giving you 3 bits of advice there, which is have a look at what lane you want to gank, and have a look at the enemy team. Have a look at the health bars of your teammates, because that's going to be indicative of if your team needs particular support at a particular moment. And then you also want to be panning the map and making sure that you're aware of where the enemies are and what bushes that they might be sitting in. Now, tip number 4 is to play aggressively when you are at ganks, when you're in a 3v2 situation. And if you're going to invade in the enemy jungle, you need to be mindful when you're doing this. Now, if you are invading after that first gank, please don't just score and then run directly into the enemy jungle. After you score, the enemy has vision on you on their minimap for about 1.5 to 2 seconds. So you need to path your you need to path the run well, right? So run for the first second and a bit, maybe back towards your lane, and then go into the enemy jungle. That way the entire enemy team is probably going to be unaware that you're running into their jungle to play aggressive to continue your lead as a jungler. Now this is a riskier play though, and you've got to keep this in mind, right? Because if you're invading their mid, what you're sacrificing is your rotation. That was point number 2. So you're sacrificing your rotation. So you can think of this as taking your second rotation of the buffs, and then you want to rotate to the middle beast after that. But it's a risky play, and if the enemy team adapt well, you could be ending yourself in a lot of trouble. And tip number 5 is know who you should be jungling based on your team comp. This is super important. It's super important. Please don't just think you can jungle as Cinderace and your team has got a bunch of auto hitters, right? Have a sense of who's going to be the best based on the team that you've got. So this is the general rule I'm going to give you. And of course, I'm always going to be criticized for a general rule, but this is how I'm going to say it. If you have 2 defenders on your team, then you want to be using an auto-attacking Pokemon. Someone like Cinderace is very good, someone like Decidueye is very good, someone like Mewtwo is very good. That's if you've got 2 defenders on your team. If you've got a supporter, just a supporter like a Hoopa or a Comfey or a Blissey, then I would suggest use a very strong brawling Pokemon, something that's an all-arounder that doesn't necessarily have to have its own self-sustain. So some good examples of this sort of Pokemon would be a Tyranitar, or it would be a Mewtwo X, or it would be a Zacian, something of that nature. And if you've got 2 attackers and you've got no supporter, then you've got to be a little bit careful here. You need to be using, and this is assuming both of the attackers claim lanes. This is quite a rare situation. I would say you need to be using a brawling Pokemon with sustain. So Urshifu has got some light level of sustain, but some other options are Scizor has some strong sustain, or if you wanted to even jungle something like Goodra, but I definitely wouldn't recommend that. So it's a Pokemon with some healing that it can do for itself on that melee basis. Another decent option here might be a Blaziken as well, but generally my go-to pick is Urshifu, because Urshifu is definitely the strongest Pokemon with some self-sustain there. So there you go, guys. That's 5 jungling tips and mechanics that you can use to improve your gameplay in Pokemon Unite. If you found this video helpful in the slightest, please consider giving it a like. Join the cool little community I got going. I've got a Discord and a lot of people are willing to help out others, so that link is in the description as well. And as always, consider being a subscriber. Say thank you, because I really do enjoy making these videos, but it's even better when I've got people giving me that positive reinforcement along the way. There's a couple videos on the screen here. If you've stuck around this long, click on one of these guides. Have a very excellent day, everyone, and good luck on that solo queue grind.